Hello, welcome to episode 4 of A Week in Watches. I am your host, Zach Weiss, co-founder of Worn & Wound. On this episode, we have various stories. We've got oysters, we've got something from the MoonSwatch, which will be a little controversial, and we have a really sweet, well, I'll get to it later. And I also answer our very first question from the audience. So excited for that. Before we get into it, this week's sponsor is once again the Wind Up Watch Fair. We'll be hosting our next fair in Chicago, July 15th through 17th. So that's actually coming up very soon. There's going to be over 40 brands in attendance. It's from watches to EDC to some other things. It's going to be really fun and exciting. It's free and it's open to the public. So if you're in the area, or if you're not and you feel like getting out of your local area, please come on by. It's a lot of fun. Stop by and say hello. For all the details, hours, address, etc., head to windupwatchfair.com. So Christopher Ward is a brand that you probably don't need much of an introduction to if you're a regular Worn & Wound reader, but for those of you who might not be, they've been sort of champions of affordable watches since 2005. They're one of the first online-only watch brands, one of the first direct-to-consumer watch brands. They've always put the concept of value for Swiss-made watches at the forefront. So back when brands were really charging a certain price point, they came in way lower for an automatic Swiss watch, and they've stuck with it. And they've really, done a lot since then. They've even developed in-house movements and very cool complications. Like I said, they're sort of a staple on Worn & Wound. They're also a brand that regularly comes to our Wind-Up Watch Fair, so you can check them out there. So Christopher Ward has partnered with the Everton Football Club, which I suppose this is where I'm supposed to make some sort of soccer joke, but I'll skip that. Everton is based in Liverpool, England, which is the home of such famous bands as Echo and the Bunnymen, A Flock of Seagulls, and this other one called the Beatles, which I think you probably heard of. They've been around since 1878. It's a globally recognized brand, and something that they point out is that they are referred to locally as the People's Club, which certainly sort of reflects Christopher Ward's values. So you can sort of see why they would team up with them. So the contract is a 5-year contract. It's their first timing partner for the Everton Football Club. And, it'll consist of such things as displaying the Christopher Ward branding in the stadium, on displays, etc. They also, and I quote, will create money can't buy experiences for Evertonians and Christopher Ward fans. We'll have to see what that is and what that means. It sounds pretty exciting. I don't know if I'll find myself in Everton anytime soon. I'm happy to stop by, but definitely interested to see what they do there with the team. So as an American who does not follow football closely, the significance perhaps of this specific team is lost, and I'm sorry to my British friends and frankly friends around the world if that offends you, but locally we're just not the biggest football fans. The overall significance, however, of Christopher Ward teaming up with them is certainly not lost. This is a huge step for the brand. It's going to spread awareness. I think Christopher Ward has demonstrated that they're not a small online-only brand. They might have started on the forums and really only communicated through websites like our own, but now they are on a much broader stage, really shoulder to shoulder with larger Swiss watch companies, and teaming up with something like a internationally recognized sports club is certainly a big step for them. So, congratulations to them. This is very cool and exciting to see where it goes. Next, Oris is all about the oysters. So Oris has released a new watch celebrating the Billion Oyster Project. This is something as a New Yorker I find particularly interesting. So Billion Oyster Project is a non-for-profit that is attempting to repopulate the New York harbor with, as the name might suggest, 1 billion oysters. So the New York harbor is the body of water that's like just south of Manhattan where the two rivers connect. It once upon a time was a beautiful waterway, and then over years and decades of terrible pollution became the opposite. It's been protected since the 1970s, and it still is not that clean. So this is an effort to help clean it and reestablish some sort of, life there. So oysters are one of Earth's natural filters. They each filter something like 50 gallons of water a day. They bring back sea life, and they also create these sort of reef structures that act as storm barriers, which is obviously very important. So in an effort to support this really cool non-for-profit, Oris has teamed up with them, and they've created the New York Harbor LE. So this is a version of their Aquas 300 millimeter diver that has a green mother of pearl dial to it. Mother of pearl is not something I've personally found to be, it's not my favorite, I should say. In traditional color, it's very, pearlescent, obviously. And the name, sort of a rainbowy effect. I'm sure you can picture it. So it's just a little opulent for my taste. But what Oris did with it was actually really pretty. It's a very soothing green color that is meant to sort of reflect what the New York Harbor would be like when it's healthy. The wavy sort of natural organic texture that comes from the mother of pearl, rather than looking blingy, for lack of a better word, actually looks like sort of water caught in motion. So it's a very elegant use of mother of pearl, while also being a very literal use of mother of pearl. It's also just a gorgeous green, quite soothing. I have a thing for green watches. So this is one of the 41.5 millimeter Aquas models. It's powered by the Solida movement. It comes with a green rubber strap, which matches the dial, as well as a bracelet. There are 2,000 units being made, and they will cost around $2,510. So whether you're looking to support this interesting cause or just happen to find this to be a very attractive version of the Aquas, such as I do, this might be one that is worth picking up. Don't get mad at me for this next one. I'm only the messenger. Nick Hayek Jr. confirms the MoonSwatch will not be sold online. Oh boy. So to just quickly rehash, the MoonSwatch, which I am wearing here today, was a huge launch. Collaboration between Omega and Swatch came out in March, I believe. I reviewed it fairly extensively. There's a 30-minute long video or something like that where I talk quite favorably about the watch. There's a lot of things I liked about the watch, but the most important thing to me was that they were making this lofted design, the Speedmaster, accessible and available essentially to the masses. But in an interview with Fratello Watches, Nick Hayek Jr., the CEO of Swatch Group, confirmed that they will not be for sale online. And to quote the interview, "There's no emotion in online buying. It's a carefully produced Swiss watch and not a commodity. After the whole world had to stay home for 2 years because of COVID, it was about time to celebrate and to bring people back on the streets, meet together, and revive the brick and mortar stores." So there's a lot to unpack there. Obviously, when it launched, they brought a lot of people out to the streets, maybe more than they initially attended. But I think the concept there is a little strange. The idea that watches that are sold online are a commodity all of a sudden. Swatch watches are sold online. Longines, one of the Swatch Group brands, are sold online. Many other brands are sold online. Certainly, I don't think that makes them any lesser of a good. And then the idea of bringing people back to brick and mortar. Sure, I sort of understand the desire for that, but the reality is everyone shops online, are comfortable with shopping online, and these weren't available just at brick and mortar. They're only available at Swatch boutiques, not every boutique. And Swatch boutiques, we're here in New York City. There's several in the city. We're pretty lucky. I can take a train and get to one in 20 minutes. There's a lot of places in the world where, you can't get to one for several hours. So the unfortunate part of this is that I think this kind of takes a blow to my favorite aspect of this watch, which was the accessibility of it and making it easily available. The idea of traveling to buy $260 watch is a little absurd. The idea of frankly, and then traveling and not being able to get it if you still wanted to pursue one. They go on to talk about how there's no reason to buy from flippers, but I think this is literally the very reason. It's accessibility. You go online. I went online to buy the one that I'm wearing today because they just weren't available. I thought that would be a temporary thing, but now it seems like that might be a little bit longer. There's still a lot to like about the watch itself, and check out my review. It's still just a very enjoyable watch and a very cool design, but I'd be lying if I didn't say that this was a bit disappointing. Eventually the demand will die down and the supply will stabilize, and they'll sit on the shelves and you'll probably be able to get one. But the idea that you still have to travel to get one, and to further it, this is a watch, and swatches in general. I had swatches when I was a kid, and I'd like to think that maybe a kid saving up their money, $260 maybe is a lot for a kid, but they save up their money to go and get one and buy one. And now the idea that they'd also have to travel to get one, get their parents to help them travel, I think that just makes it all the more daunting. So let us know what you think about this. I think I know, but just love to hear your thoughts on the matter. Anyway, it is time for the release of the week. G-Shock returns to the virtual world. So one of the coolest watches of last year, in my opinion, I think many of my colleagues here at Worn and Wound, was the Virtual Armor G-Shock, which is GMW B5000 TVA. So this was part of the Full Metal 5000 series, which are full metal versions of that iconic G-Shock silhouette. The people often refer to it as a square, but the bezel is actually an octagonal shape, but it's that classic G-Shock, the 5600, the same one that you can get, made out of resin for $80 or whatever it is. They took that, they made them out of metal, they made them higher end, and they range in price from several hundred to actually several thousand now. It does feature a slightly different module than the most inexpensive ones, which is also Bluetooth enabled and solar. But what really made this watch amazing was the style of it and the case. So it was a full titanium watch featuring a DLC coating that was like a dark gray. It wasn't quite black. It was this charcoal gray that just had a different presence to it. It was all matte, and it had these cool laser etchings all over it of just little words and details. The idea being it sort of looked like a mech suit, shrunken down, like don't step here, don't touch that, that kind of thing. But it was stuff that was relevant to the watch itself. It was just super cool looking. It was one of those watches when you put on your wrist, it just had a great feeling to it. They also, one of the cool features, they milled out these little holes in all of the lugs, so they reduced the weight even more. So this thing was just feather light, which just made it feel even more technical and sleek, which just went really well with the concept. So this year's model, however, might even top that previous one. So it's the Virtual Armor 2, as you might have guessed, and that's the BMW B5000 TVB one. So it's the same full metal 5000 base, and it's also full titanium. This thing weighs only like 104 grams, but what makes this one really cool is the coating. So it's a mix of titanium carbide and ion plating. And so you get 3 colors on this one watch. You have kind of classic raw titanium, you have dark gray, and you have like a dark brown. Brown is not a watch color you see on watch cases very often. So that immediately adds some visual intrigue, but then the way it's applied is even cooler. So if you can imagine the Tokyo Twilight watch, which was another really cool G-Shock from last year, also part of the Full Metal series, that had a range of like blues and purples, where on the bracelet, each link was sort of a different color. It's a logical way to bring in several colors into a watch. Here, it's multicolored. So the whole thing is based on like a geometric camouflage concept. So there's facets and cutouts where you'll see gray, then brown will cut in, then dark gray will come through, and it's all these kind of faceted triangular shapes. It looks like it's random. It's not random, but it definitely gives that effect. And it's just like completely rad and unique looking. This version of the watch is also limited. I don't know the quantity on that. And it will cost $1,700, which once again might be, a bit steeper than you expect for a G-Shock. But like I said, at this point, they have watches that go up into the few $1,000s range. And when you see this thing in person, you can see where the money's going. It's the case is really unlike anything else you've seen. Lastly, I asked for questions, and we got one question. It's not a lot of questions, but it's a pretty good one, and we have to start somewhere. So last week, Drew K9121, and thank you for asking this question, asks, what are some misconceptions about the watch industry that you could clear up for enthusiasts? That's a really good question, and I have to be careful not to end up in some sort of controversial space or put my foot in my mouth or something like that. So I was thinking about, what was one of those first kind of like eye-opening moments, and this might seem kind of obvious, but just like how watches really are made. When you're on the other end of it, watches are delivered as these kind of beautiful, pristine things from luxury brands. There's all these stories about them, and they spin a tail, and you almost get the sense that they're made in almost these two different places. You have either a laboratory that's ultra clean with robots and people in masks and little suits on and things like that, or by some like wizened old watchmaker single-handedly polishing every little bevel. But the reality is sort of somewhere in between, and it's quite industrial and raw. When you go to a factory, it's a machining factory. Cases are being cut, plates of bronze are being milled. It's loud, it's smelly, it's not this ultra clean, pretty, pristine thing that you see on the other end. Obviously, in the production of watches, as you go along the chain, just further and further towards the final product, things get cleaner and cleaner and cleaner. Obviously, movement assembly is done in like a type of a clean room. Watch assembly is done in a type of a clean room. But in my experience, still, it's not those like hyperbaric chambers either. There might be anti-static suits on, there might be little booties, the room might be pressurized to keep dust on the ground, but there's music playing, there's people doing their job. It's very, I don't know, kind of like, not underwhelming in a bad way, but it's work, and they're assembling these things, and they kind of become these objects that are sort of, greater than the sum of all the parts in the end. And then, I don't know, to me that sort of adds to it. It doesn't take away from it. I like the fact that these are industrial objects that hold these stories to them and hold fashion and hold style and just all these other things that, we love about watches. If you ever have the opportunity to take a tour of a manufacturer, I highly suggest it. Seeing how the sausage is made, so to speak, I just think is really eye-opening. And that's it for this week. Thanks again for your questions. Please do continue to submit. We'll try to take them as we go along. I'd love those questions to be about the news of the week or something that's come out in recent times, or maybe something that we didn't cover on an episode that you'd like to hear more about. But in the meantime, for daily watch content, please head to wornandwound.com. And also don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you.